In a split second, a stranger's courage changed everything. She's a millionaire with a hidden past. He's a man running from his own. What happens when their worlds collide? You won't believe the journey ahead. Hey, have you ever been saved by a stranger? Share your story in the comments below. I'd love to hear it. If this hook has you hooked, smash that subscribe button and ring the bell so you don't miss a single twist in this tale of love and redemption. Let's uncover the mystery together. The rain came down in relentless sheets, drumming against the windshield of James Caldwell's beat-up pickup truck as he navigated the winding back roads of coastal California. At 45, James carried the weight of a life that had once brimmed with promise, but now felt like a faded photograph. Edges curling, colors dulled by time. 3 years had passed since the divorce, a quiet unraveling that left him hollow, and 5 since he'd lost his daughter Lily to a car accident that still haunted his dreams. The garage he ran was his refuge, a place where greasy hands and the hum of engines drowned out the silence of an empty house. Tonight, though, even the steady rhythm of wipers couldn't wash away the ache in his chest. He slowed as a pair of hazard lights blinked through the downpour ahead, a sleek Mercedes stranded on the shoulder, its elegance stark against the rugged landscape. James' first instinct was to keep driving. He had no business meddling in someone else's trouble, not when his own life was a mess of unhealed wounds. But then he saw her, a woman, her face pressed against the window, eyes wide with panic. Something in that look tugged at him, a flicker of Lily's frightened expression from that fateful night years ago. Cursing under his breath, he pulled over, grabbed his raincoat, and stepped into the storm. The wind whipped at his jacket as he approached the car, rain soaking through to his skin. He knocked on the window, and the door creaked open to reveal a young woman, no older than 28, her auburn hair plastered to her face. She wore a shimmering evening gown, the kind that belonged at a gala, not a deserted highway. Her breath came in shallow gasps as she tugged futilely at the seatbelt, its mechanism jammed tight across her chest. "Help me, please," she cried, her voice trembling over the roar of the rain. "It won't budge." James' heart thudded. He'd seen this before. Panic, helplessness, the kind that preceded disaster. Without a word, he leaned in, his calloused fingers working the buckle. The mechanism resisted, rusted or damaged, and he fumbled in his pocket for his pocket knife. "Hold still," he muttered, his voice gruff but steady. With a careful slice, he cut through the strap, freeing her just as a deafening horn blared behind them. A massive truck barreled past, its tires hydroplaning inches from the Mercedes, sending a wave of water crashing over them. The car rocked violently, and for a moment James thought it might tip into the ditch. When the chaos subsided, the woman stared at him, her blue eyes wide with shock and gratitude. You saved me," she whispered, her voice breaking. Rainwater dripped from her lashes, mingling with tears he wasn't sure she knew she was shedding. James stepped back, wiping his hands on his jeans. "Just doing what anyone would," he said, his tone clipped. He didn't want her thanks, didn't want the weight of her gaze. It reminded him too much of the people who'd thanked him after Lily's funeral. Empty words that couldn't fill the void. "You okay to drive? I'd call a tow, but my phone's dead." She nodded, though her hands trembled as she gripped the steering wheel. "I'm fine, thank you. What's your name?" "James," he said reluctantly, then turned away. "Take care." Before she could say more, he hurried back to his truck, his boots splashing through puddles. He didn't look back, but the image of her, vulnerable yet regal in that soaked gown, lingered in his mind. Who was she? Why was she out here alone, dressed like she'd stepped out of a magazine? The questions gnawed at him, but he pushed them aside. His life was a quiet one, built on routine and solitude, and he had no room for mysteries. As he drove home, the rain eased into a gentle patter and the radio crackled to life, filling the cab with a soft country tune. Something about second chances. James smirked bitterly. Second chances were for people who hadn't lost everything. Yet as the headlights carved through the darkness, he couldn't shake the feeling that tonight had shifted something inside him. It was a small thing, cutting that seatbelt, but it stirred a memory of Lily's laughter, of the man he'd once been, someone who believed in helping others without expecting anything in return. Back at the garage, he parked and sat in silence, the engine ticking as it cooled. The woman's face haunted him, those eyes, that gratitude. He wondered if she'd make it home safely, if she'd tell someone about the gruff mechanic who'd pulled her from danger. Probably not. People like her, rich, polished, didn't linger on men like him. Still, the thought of her out there, alone again, unsettled him. He reached for a rag to wipe the rain from his face, but his hands paused mid-air. For the first time in years, he felt a flicker of purpose, a whisper of something he couldn't name. Meanwhile, miles away, Sophia Langston steered the Mercedes toward her seaside mansion, her heart still racing. The near miss with the truck replayed in her mind, but it was the stranger's steady hands that anchored her thoughts. James. A simple name for a man who'd acted without hesitation, without asking for reward. She glanced at the severed seatbelt, its frayed edges, a stark reminder of how close she'd come to disaster. Tonight was supposed to be a celebration. Her latest fashion line had launched to rave reviews, cementing her status as a millionaire at 28. Yet the gala felt hollow now. A glittering cage she'd escaped only to face death on this lonely road. Sophia's life had been a whirlwind of success since she'd turned her childhood dreams into a multi-million-dollar empire. But beneath the accolades lay a scar, her ex-fiancé who'd wooed her for her wealth, then left when she refused to fund his reckless ventures. That betrayal had taught her to guard her heart, to rely on no one, until tonight. James' selfless act cracked something open inside her, a longing for connection she'd buried deep. She resolved to find him, to thank him properly. With her resources, it wouldn't be hard. Her team could trace the truck's license plate. By morning, as she pulled into her driveway, the rain stopped and a sliver of moonlight broke through the clouds. Sophia stepped out, the cool air brushing her skin, and looked back toward the road. Somewhere out there was a man who'd saved her life, unaware of the ripple he'd set in motion. For the first time in years, she felt a spark of hope. Hope that maybe, just maybe, kindness could lead her to something real. James, meanwhile, locked up the garage and walked to his darkened house, the weight of the night settling on his shoulders. He didn't know it yet, but that single act of kindness had begun to weave a thread between two lives, a thread that would pull them toward each other in ways neither could foresee. As he climbed into bed, the rain's echo faded, leaving behind a silence filled with possibility. The morning sun filtered through the grimy windows of James Caldwell's garage, casting long shadows across the oil-stained floor. The air smelled of gasoline and metal, a scent that usually steadied him, but today it felt thin, as if the events of the previous night had left a crack in his routine. James wiped his hands on a rag, his mind drifting to the woman in the Mercedes, Sophia, he'd learned her name was, thanks to the persistent hum of local gossip that reached him through a customer. Word had spread fast in this small coastal town. A young millionaire had nearly died on Highway 1, saved by a mysterious mechanic. James hadn't sought the attention, but it found him anyway, like a moth drawn to a flame he didn't want to tend. He was bent over a '67 Mustang, its engine purring under his skilled hands, when the bell above the garage door jingled. James straightened, expecting another curious local, but instead, there she was, Sophia Langston, her auburn hair swept into a loose bun, dressed in a tailored coat that screamed wealth, but softened by a hesitant smile. In her hands, she carried a wicker basket draped with a checkered cloth, the faint aroma of freshly baked bread wafting toward him. James froze, his heart kicking against his ribs. He hadn't expected to see her again. Certainly not here, in the heart of his sanctuary. "Mr. Caldwell?" she asked, her voice gentle but firm, carrying the polished edge of someone used to commanding rooms. "I'm Sophia. We met last night." James nodded, setting down his wrench with deliberate care. "I remember. You didn't need to come all this way. I was just doing my job." Her smile widened, though her eyes held a flicker of uncertainty. "It was more than a job. You saved my life. I couldn't just let that go without saying thank you properly." She stepped forward, offering the basket. "I made these myself, sourdough and apple turnovers. It's not much, but I hoped you'd accept them." James stared at the basket, then at her. The gesture was simple, almost old-fashioned, and it stirred something in him. A memory of his mother baking on Sunday mornings before life grew complicated. But he shook his head, stepping back. "I appreciate it, ma'am, but I don't take gifts for doing what's right. Anyone would have done the same." Sophia's expression faltered, but she didn't retreat. "Maybe, but you did, and I'd feel better if you'd at least share a coffee with me. There's a diner down the road. My treat." Her tone was earnest, her blue eyes locking onto his with an intensity that made him uneasy. He wanted to refuse, to retreat into the safety of his solitude, but there was a sincerity in her that disarmed him. After a long pause, he sighed. "All right, one coffee, but that's it." The diner was a cozy relic of another era, with red vinyl booths and a jukebox humming faintly in the corner. They slid into a booth by the window, the rain-scented air giving way to the warm smell of coffee and frying bacon. Sophia ordered for them, black coffee for him, a latte for her, and the silence stretched until she broke it. "I owe you an explanation," she began, her fingers tracing the rim of her cup. "Last night, I was coming from a gala in San Francisco. My fashion line launched, and it's been a lot. I needed air, so I drove. Then that truck..." She shivered, her gaze dropping. "I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't stopped." James sipped his coffee, the bitterness grounding him. "Glad I was there. But you don't owe me anything. I've seen enough accidents to know timing's everything." She nodded, then hesitated before adding, "There's something else. I'm well off. A millionaire, technically. My company, Langston Designs, has done well. But last night reminded me how fragile it all is. Money can't save you when a seatbelt jams." The revelation hit James like a cold wave. A millionaire. He'd figured she was rich, her car, her clothes, but the word carried a weight that widened the gulf between them. He was a divorced mechanic with a scarred past, living paycheck to paycheck, while she moved in circles he couldn't imagine. Yet her vulnerability softened the edge of that disparity. He saw not just wealth, but a woman who'd faced her own battles. "I don't care about money," he said gruffly. "Never did. Lost too much to know it don't fix what's broken inside." Sophia's eyes softened, and for a moment they sat in a shared silence that felt heavier than words. She leaned forward, her voice dropping. "Then what does? Because I've built an empire, and I still feel empty sometimes. Like last night, alone on that road, I realized how little I have that matters." James' throat tightened. He thought of Lily, of the laughter that once filled his home, now just an echo. "Family," he said quietly. "Love. The stuff you can't buy. Took me losing it to figure that out." The confession hung between them, raw and unguarded. Sophia reached out, her hand brushing his across the table, a fleeting touch that sent a jolt through him. He pulled back, startled, but her smile was warm, not pitying. "Maybe we can learn from each other," she suggested. "I'd like to know more about you, James, if you'll let me." He wanted to say no, to protect the walls he'd built, but her sincerity chipped at them. "I'm not much for talking," he admitted, "but I reckon I could use a friend." The rest of the morning passed in easy conversation. Her tales of designing dresses under pressure, his stories of restoring classic cars. She laughed at his dry humor, and he found himself relaxing, the weight on his shoulders lightening. When they parted, she left the basket on the table, insisting he keep it. "Consider it a start," she said with a wink, leaving him with a business card bearing her name and number. Back at the garage, James stared at the card, then the turnovers, their golden crust a stark contrast to his rough hands. He hadn't expected this. A millionaire seeking him out, not for charity, but for connection. The thought unnerved him, yet it sparked a curiosity he hadn't felt in years. Who was Sophia Langston beyond her wealth? What drove her to step into his world? That night, as he sat with a turnover in hand, the sweet apple filling melting on his tongue, James replayed their conversation. Her emptiness mirrored his own, a shared wound that bridged their differences. He glanced at the card again, his finger tracing her name. Part of him wanted to toss it, to keep his life simple, but another part, the part that had saved her last night, whispered that maybe, just maybe, this was a chance to heal. Miles away, Sophia sat in her sprawling mansion, the ocean waves a distant lullaby. She'd spent the day with her team, tracing James' garage through the truck's license plate, a task made easy with her resources. But it was his face that lingered, lined with experience, softened by kindness. She'd built walls after her. Ex-fiancé's betrayal, a man who'd courted her for her millions before walking away when she saw through his greed. That wound still stung, but James' selfless act chipped at her defenses. She wanted to know him, not as a savior, but as a man. She pulled out her phone, hesitating over his number. The gala had been a triumph, yet it felt hollow compared to the warmth of that diner booth. With a deep breath, she typed a message. "Thank you again, James. Can I visit tomorrow? Sophia." She hit send, her heart racing. This was uncharted territory, but for the first time in years, she felt alive with possibility. James' phone buzzed on the counter, the screen lighting up with her name. He stared at it, the turnover forgotten. The rain had stopped outside, leaving a quiet that felt pregnant with change. He didn't know it yet, but that simple act of kindness was weaving a thread between them, one that would pull them closer in ways neither could predict. The sun hung low over the Pacific, casting a golden hue across James Caldwell's garage as he tinkered with the '67 Mustang's carburetor. The day had dragged since Sophia's visit, her business card still tucked into his wallet like a secret. He wasn't sure how to handle her text from the night before. "Thank you again, James. Can I visit tomorrow?" Sophia had kept him awake, his mind wrestling with the idea of letting her back into his world. He typed a dozen replies, each deleted, until he settled on a curt, "Sure, morning works." Now, as the clock ticked toward 9 a.m., his stomach churned with a mix of anticipation and dread. The bell jingled, and there she was, Sophia Langston, her auburn hair loose today, framing a face that seemed softer without the gala glamour. She wore a simple sweater and jeans, a stark contrast to the evening gown of their first meeting, and carried a thermos of coffee. "I thought we could skip the diner," she said with a shy smile. "Figured you'd be busy here." James wiped, his hands on a rag, nodding. "Appreciate it. Coffee's always welcome." He gestured to a worn chair in the corner, and they settled in, the garage's quiet hum wrapping around them like a cocoon. She poured the coffee, rich and aromatic, into two mismatched mugs, and for a moment they sipped in companionable silence, the clink of metal from his tools a gentle underscore. "So," Sophia began, her tone light but curious, "tell me about this place. It's alive somehow." James chuckled, a rare sound that surprised even him. "Been my life for 20 years. Started it after my dad passed. Wanted to keep his legacy going. Cars are honest. They don't judge you, just need fixing. He paused, his gaze drifting to a photo on the wall. Him and Lily, her gap-toothed grin beaming at 8 years old. The ache returned, sharp and familiar, but he pushed on. Lost my daughter a while back. Accident. This garage. It's where I hide from that. Sophia's expression softened, her mug pausing mid-air. I'm so sorry, James. I can't imagine. Her voice carried a weight that told him she meant it, and he found himself meeting her eyes, seeing not pity but understanding. Guess we all got our scars, he said, deflecting. What about you? You're young, successful, millionaire, right? What's your story? She sighed, setting her mug down. Success sounds nicer than it is. I grew up in a trailer park outside Sacramento, sewing dresses for my mom to sell at flea markets. When she died, cancer, when I was 16, I turned that into Langston Designs, built it from nothing, but... Her voice cracked, and she looked away, blinking rapidly. I got engaged once, thought he loved me. Turns out, he loved my bank, account more. Walked away when I wouldn't fund his gambling debts. The confession hung heavy, and James felt a pang of recognition. Betrayal, loss, it was a language he spoke too. Sounds like you've been through the ringer, he said gently. Takes guts to keep going after that. Sophia wiped a tear, laughing softly through it. Guess we're a pair, huh? You with your garage, me with my empire. Both of us, hiding from something. She leaned forward, her hand brushing his again, this time lingering. I don't want to hide anymore, James. Last night on that road, I felt so alone. Then you showed up. It's like maybe there's more out there. Her touch sent a warmth through him, but it also stirred his defenses. He pulled back, his jaw tightening. I'm not sure I'm the one to show it to you. I'm older, set in my ways. You've got a whole world ahead. Before she could respond, a sob escaped her, a sound so raw it stopped him cold. She buried her face in her hands, shoulders shaking. I miss her, she whispered. My mom, she was my rock, and without her. I've been running, building, proving something. But to who? Myself? Him? The tears flowed freely now, and James, against every instinct, reached out. His rough hand covered hers, a clumsy but sincere gesture. Hey, he said softly, his voice rough with emotion. You don't have to prove anything to me or anyone. Your mom, she'd be proud, I reckon. I see it in you, strength, even when it hurts. Sophia looked up, her eyes red but bright with gratitude. She squeezed his hand, and for a moment, they sat there, connected by shared pain. The garage seemed to fade, leaving only the two of them, two souls adrift who'd found a tether. James felt a crack in the walls he'd built, Lily's memory, his divorce, the years of solitude, and for the first time, he didn't rush to patch it. I used to dream of being a mechanic, Sophia admitted, a small smile breaking through. Mom couldn't afford tools, but I'd watch YouTube videos, imagining I could fix anything. Maybe that's why I feel at home here. James raised an eyebrow, a grin tugging at his lips. Well, I'll be damned. A millionaire with grease. In her blood. We'll have to put that to the test sometime. The levity eased the tension, and they laughed, a sound that echoed off the garage walls, lightening the air. As the afternoon waned, Sophia stood to leave, but not before suggesting, how about I come back, help you with a project? I'd love to learn. Her tone was hopeful, and James, despite his reservations, found himself nodding. Bring that coffee again, he said, his voice warmer than he intended. We'll start with something easy. After she left, James sat with his mug, the coffee now cold, but the warmth of her presence lingering. He thought of Lily, how she'd loved watching him work, asking questions with that bright curiosity. Sophia's confession about her mom, her ex, stirred a parallel pain, but also a kinship. He hadn't expected this. A woman so different yet, so similar, stepping into his life with a basket and a story. The business card in his wallet felt heavier now, a promise he wasn't sure he was ready to keep. Miles away, Sophia drove home, her hands steady on the wheel, but her heart racing. The garage had felt more like home than her mansion ever had, and James' touch, rough yet gentle, had awakened